we created Salesforce Republic, me, Chris, and the rest of the Third Republic team founded this to really kind of support users and other Salesforce professionals, really optimize the tools that they can out of the system. Those of you who aren't aware of what Salesforce Republic.io is, that is our community that we go through the ecosystem with some of the other influencers and MVPs and create some content, both careers within Salesforce as well as how we utilize the platform. We are joined tonight by Matthew Byrne from FinancialForce. He's the lead product owner, and David Masri, founder and CEO of Gluon Digital. He's joining us all the way from the US. So welcome to you both. But to kick off, Matt from FinancialForce, I'll pass it over to you.
That's what I'm here to talk about, which is Einstein Analytics. Sorry, formerly Einstein Analytics. I don't know if anyone's seen any announcements. It's now called Tableau CRM. Okay, that's going to lead to a little bit of confusion, but yeah, it's called Einstein Analytics has been renamed Tableau CRM. I'll also be going over forecasting with time series. That's going to be the basis of this. I'm going to go from different levels. We're going to start with like beginner stuff, show a little bit of advanced stuff as well. But hopefully there's a little bit for everybody in there. Start off with who I am. I am Matt Byrne. I work for FinancialForce. I'm lead product manager there for all of the reporting and analytics that covers the whole suite of products and tools. I've been there for, it will be 9 years in November. I started off there as a graduate based in the Harrogate office. Went through various roles, did some tutorials, and then went on to kind of consulting, did some solution. I was a solution specialist for a while as well, and then went into product management. So I've had a lot of growth through the business, and quite happy there. I'm also, I think I'm now a Salesforce Tableau CRM champion. They haven't told us whether our title's changing, but I don't know if anyone's been to any of the other ones that I've presented at before. The very first one that I presented at was back in either October or November last year. I think it was November last year, just before Dreamforce, in the Third Republic offices. It was hosted by the Data Tribe, the London Data Tribe. So I do enjoy the analytics stuff, and I'm quite passionate about it. I'm also a woodworker in my spare time. I'm going to be showing the majority of this is going to be spent not looking at FinancialForce product, but I'll show a little bit at the end around how we've used the time series functionality to hopefully give you some ideas. But I won't be showing any forward-looking stuff anyway. My agenda is who is FinancialForce? Who am I? When did we start using Tableau CRM, Einstein Analytics? Why did we use it? Where can you get the data from? What can you do with it? And what can you do with the time series? And then we'll have any questions at the end as well. I like doing that. I'll also take, there's questions throughout. We'll put them in the chat and try and answer some at different points. Who's FinancialForce? We have over 1,300 customers. We are the #1 professional services automation tool, 700 employees, and we've seen a lot of growth. Our Salesforce are our investor as well. And just to give you an idea of FinancialForce, we have the whole suite of products from the accounting, the finance department, all the way through the opportunity and the CRM management stuff we integrate with this. We've also got some billing solutions as well, about making billing documents and billing contracts. And we've got project management tools in there as well in order to manage those and log time and expenses in Salesforce too. We also have the revenue management functionality related to the finance and being sourced from all the different locations. And we also have communities product, plus the analytics and reporting, which actually should really cover all of this. That's the area that I look after at FinancialForce. We need to change so much in our marketing stuff where it says Einstein now, but never mind. When did we start using, I'm going to keep saying Einstein Analytics, which is fine. When did we start using Einstein Analytics? So back in 2008, FinancialForce was first listed on the App Exchange, the first time we were out there. And then in 2014, we had access to a pilot for Einstein Analytics. Back then, it was called EdgeSpring, and then it was renamed Wave, and then renamed Einstein Analytics, and it's been renamed again. We didn't actually start productizing it back then, though, but it was just a pilot. We had a little play around. In 2017, We started using Einstein tools internally. We did some analytics. We also used some of their AI tools to build some Einstein discovery models to predict churn and profitability. So that's what we started using internally. We then in 2018 did our first release of analytics for our products. And we actually find that when we include analytics in our deals, we have a 4.5 times higher close rate when analytics is included compared to when it isn't included. Now, why do we use this technology? There's a bunch of reasons. I'm sure everyone's a user of Salesforce, so I can't be the only one that ended up building Salesforce reports and for a lot of information and trying to run these reports and seeing a message pop up saying CPU timeout error. Okay, hopefully that's something a lot of people have seen. Einstein allows it to work with the volumes for Einstein. It can manage up to 10 billion records. Okay, that is the volumes that it can handle. So that for us was like, oh, fantastic. We don't have to worry about CPU timeouts anymore. Now, it can handle 10 billion records, but it can also do it incredibly quickly as well. So the performance is incredible on aggregating that information. Now, also, another reason we went down this path is that there are some limitations when you're reporting on the platform. So some of the things will be that when you create a report type for your report, you typically choose 3 objects moving up. Also, in some places, and you may be familiar with this in your own environments, you may have made decisions in the past about the structure of objects or fields, and you may have decided further down the line that actually, if we could go back, we would have done it a little bit differently to make it more reportable and combine things in different places. And for me, one of the most important things is unification. So the example I'll give here is when you go into Salesforce and you go to build a report and you say new report, and you have to choose the report type, and you might search for something like account. Yeah, because I want some account stuff in there. Account, and up comes dozens and dozens of different report types. Account with this, account with that, account with and without this, and same for opportunity. You don't necessarily know which one to pick half the time. And you'll go away and you'll build a report based on this, and somebody will build another report based on a different report type. And they're saying, why are we getting different numbers? Because they're different report types and you can't reconcile them. In Einstein, we can have a single report type, which is like a data set, to bring it all together. Now, how does Tableau CRM work? This is where I've updated my slide. It can take your Salesforce data. It can also take a CSV data or external data. I've listed Snowflake in there. Snowflake's one of the external data connections. They provided some information quite early on for COVID analysis, if you're interested in that. And this information can come in through Einstein Analytics. Oh, I need to change it there. Oh, what a rebranding task. And I can transform the information. So I can combine different data sources. I can take the external and the Salesforce data, combine them together, transform them, change the way that they appear, and create charts and tables with that information. Now, with these different data sources, I wanted to do something that was a little bit fun, a little bit interesting. So today, to start off with, when I say you can bring in CSV files of data, there is a website called Kaggle. I don't know if anyone's heard of Kaggle, but Kaggle has a bunch of different data sets, and you can go ahead and you can download these data sets, these CSVs, and you can upload them, and you can do your own analysis on them. Now, the example I've chosen today is related to Kickstarter projects, and the data goes up to the end of 2016, and it allows us to analyze 300,000 Kickstarter projects. Okay. I don't know if anyone's invested in a Kickstarter project. If you have, it'd be nice to know. But what the Kickstarter website is all about is people want help starting their business. Okay, and they've got a whole bunch of different business areas which you can explore. We can go into design and tech, for example. Okay. And we can find where there's currently ongoing campaigns. And if we just scroll through, we can see some. What have we got here? Water purification. We've also got, there we go, a refillable deodorant. Not something I've thought about. But the idea is that they need to get a certain amount of money for their business. And this is how much they've raised. And they've raised that through 650 backers. And when you choose to invest in one, sometimes you can get rewards. So if you invested £5, you get a high five. There you get an early bird pack if you invest £17 or more. Yeah, this kind of stuff. And this is what I thought we'd build some stuff on today. So I went ahead and took the data set from Kaggle, and I exported the CSV, and I went into Einstein and I uploaded it. And I now have a data set within Einstein, which allows me to report on it. So we can see that this is based on 323,000 Kickstarter projects. And we're going to start exploring this data, and then we're going to go into some time series functionality as well. So the kind of first thing that we can have a look at is we can break this information down by country, by category, by the state, the status. We can also go in and we can report on the number of backers, the goal amount, how much was pledged in there as well. So I thought we'd just ask a couple questions. If people can put it in the chat, how much in US dollars do you think was pledged for Kickstarter up to the end of 2016? Let's just have a little bit of fun with these kind of questions. So just put a number in the chat, and we'll see quickly who's closest. So how much in US dollars was invested from the start of Kickstarter all the way up to the end of 2016? How much was pledged by users? We got 50 million. That's one of the guesses. Any other guesses? 20 million. Oh, we're dropping. 80 million. Okay, you're going to be surprised. 100 million. Oh, what terrible guesses. What terrible guesses. Let's see if you get better at this. If we change it to have a look at the total amount of pledged, it's 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion. I think that's pretty cool. So that's how much has been pledged. I'll also ask you the question as well, because I think this stuff is interesting. How many backers do you think there have been in total as well? So I can come in and I can see how many people do you think have invested in that 2.5 billion? 2,000? Oh, much more. Oh, wow. There's so many millionaires investing with that kind of stuff. So we can have a look at the number of backers. We've got 33 million backers. Okay, we've got some close guesses there. Close guesses. Now, this is how we're starting to break down that information. I can go ahead and delete this. What I can look at is I can also add in the names. Okay, and what this allows me to do is to have a list of all of those Kickstarter campaigns, all 300,000 of them. Okay, and I can see how much was pledged for each of them. We can see some here, like it's a hot cappuccino night, had $20 invested. If I just click the top of this, I can sort it and I can see, hopefully you can see that. Do people need me to zoom in? One of those campaigns, Pebble Time, managed to get 20 million from people. Okay, and we can see this sorted. We can see the top ones. Pebble 2 as well, because 20 million was not enough. And the same Pebble again. Pebble keeps popping up. Okay, so we can start to see this information. We can also put in there the number of backers, and if we wanted to with Einstein, we can also go in and add formulas where you can go beyond your data. So we can go in and we can add in a formula to work out as an average. Okay, now when you're building formulas, you're taking the letters from the top A and B, and we can just go, there's the number pledged, this is the amount of backers. If we were to get the average pledge, we can do A divided by B, and that's going to be the average amount that people are investing in those products. Okay, I can go to tables as well, and if I want to, I should be able to sort that column to see how much was invested. Some of them had no backers at all, which is obviously a shame, but we can clip this, which allows us to build up a dashboard. Okay, we can also go ahead and we can have a look at different categories. There we go. So we'll go into, let me unsort this column because I'm going to clear sort, add in a category, and there's multiple categories here. I'm going to choose the main category. There are a number of different categories related to this information. Some of them are art, comics. Let's see if you can just have a very quick guess at which category do you think has raised the most money. Got art, comics, crafts, dance, design, fashion, film, video, food, games, journalism, music. Any quick guesses? I'll let you take a quick guess. Okay, technology. Okay, so in order to have a look at which ones have got the most, we're going to take off this. Let's see. We're going to take off the formula first. There we go. Formula's gone. Take off the backers because we don't need that. We just want to have a look at the pledge, and we don't need the name of them. We just want to see a total for each category. And if we just sort that in descending order, you can see the category with the most is games. Okay, I don't think anyone guessed that. Design technology's up there high. There's your list. Now we can turn these into charts. Let's turn it into a chart, and I think a good one is a pie chart there. Okay, all 25 billion records, the amount invested in each of them, and we can go ahead and change donut charts to display the percentage as well. Okay, and we could take this, we could clip it, we could put it on our dashboard as well. And the benefit of Einstein is that if we have multiple charts on the same dashboard, these charts are going to interact between each other. So I could click on games and it's going to show me the top games. There we go. Exploding Kittens. Not heard of that one. But these dashboards are kind of interactive between each other. Now, where I showed you, let's go back here, adding in different formulas before, so we could do the information. Gaming's doing very well at the moment as well, with people not being able to leave the house. So they're spending their money on games as well, which is quite interesting. If I was to change this and instead tell me how much was invested by each year and month, okay, let's remove that sort. I can see from the very beginning how much has been pledged for all time in there. Okay, now this is going to change if we were to view this as a timeline chart. We need a time axis. Let's put that up there. Let's change that. I don't want lines. I'm going to have launched year, month. We can see the growth. We can see that there's a bit of outlying data there, so we can go ahead and filter that out. I'm just going to zoom back a little bit because the UI has gone a bit funny. Filter it for launched, and I'm just going to filter it to just show me between 2000 and 2016. Okay, just filtering that information. This is showing me that information over time. I'm not sure why it's showing me a percentage at the moment, but that's what we've got growing. Okay, now if we go back to our data table and we can see that information, we can also go in, and over in Einstein there is a function called time series. If I add in another column, add a formula, I'm not going to use this A/B stuff. I'm going to choose one of the functions called time series. You can see I do running total. Time series is one of those functions. It lets me choose which column I want to use to generate a prediction. It lets me choose how many prediction points I want. So if I set that as 12, it also chooses whether or not I want to take into account seasonality. And what this is going to do is generate a model that lines up best with the data that we have here. So in a simple form, you could expect a kind of straight line method, okay, that's going to draw a straight line to see whether it's going up or down through the data, get the average. This will allow to do some trended smoothing in that data, okay? It can also take different prediction models as well. And if I press apply, you can see that it started to generate a prediction column. So generating a model and trying to guess what the values are going to be. So it's not always going to be perfect, but you can see that it's guessed the actual value was 513,000. It's guessed about 496 with its model that it's got. Using this information, if I press close there, we can go and visualize this on the charts. Okay, and we can see that they're called the same thing. So let's just rename these. I'm going to call it prediction. Okay, we've got our prediction column. We can see that the prediction is looking pretty similar to the data underneath. And to see how similar it is looking, we can go ahead and we can make it so that it uses a single axis, okay, and lines things up. Let's also see why those numbers are appearing. There we go, on there. So the model that it's generated is in red, and it's taking away things like those spikes, but it's generating a model that is pretty close. Okay, I think that's pretty close. And then it's got our prediction going out 12 months. Now that prediction is just a straight line at the moment. And the reason for that is that we haven't taken into account seasonality. So hopefully when you're looking at this, you can see different spikes. Yeah, they're going to be seasons. So over here, this is kind of December. For some reason, there is less people investing money in Kickstarter in December's. So let's take that into account when we're generating our prediction. If we go ahead and edit the parameters here, we can add in seasonality. Now by default, we get the value of 12, which means have a look at each of the every 12 months to see if there's a pattern. So look at the last 12 and then 12 before that to see a pattern. You can also have 4 as well if instead of months we were looking at quarters. Okay, so if I set seasonality to 12, there we go, and we've got our prediction generated now. If I close that, our prediction is now lined up so well that it is nearly unbelievable of how well that's lining up and taken into account. But it's managed to generate a model that lines up with that prediction, and then make a model that lines up with the data, and then generates a prediction going forward that has that same pattern. Now there's a big drop at the end here, okay? And so there's different functions we can do to take that into account. We could choose a particular range of time to look at instead of going all the way to the end. I think at the end it's a December, so it's dropping off a little bit there. But we can take that information and generate a prediction. Now there are extra functions within analytics that we can use, but first what I want to show you is how we can explore this data a little bit differently in a dashboard. So here's a dashboard that I've created with the Kickstarter data, and it can tell me that there's 323,000 campaigns. I've got my the total of all the goals was 15 million, and the total amount of the goals was 15 billion, sorry, and the pledged is not that amount. And then we've got the difference between them as well. You can also see how we've tracked that over time along with the pledged amount logged by the state, which is whether it's successful or not. Okay, so if we were to have a look at filtering the state to show me the successful campaigns, instead I can see that information broken down like this. Instead of pledged, maybe I want to have a look at the total number of campaigns, which seems to be quite steady, but they're having more and more invested. So the number of campaigns hasn't gone up. Maybe the goals of those campaigns has gone up instead. Now there is subcategories in there as well. To have a look at, if I wanted to have a look at the music that we've got in there, it's going to break it down into a subcategory as well, into kind of indie rock, and I can have a look and filter this information because everything interacts, to have a look at those that have had the most invested or the most backed into that as well. I could also go ahead and sort it by the average number of backers. Okay, so this the average amount per backer, just by clicking on this information to filter it. So I can see there's a lot that have not had much invested, but some of these have had quite a large amount. So this one's looking a bit funny for me, which is 10,000 asked for, 10,000 pledged by one person. That all seems a little bit iffy to me. I can also go ahead and see the campaigns with the most pledged, which we've seen, and also further down the list, go ahead and filter it. So if I look at something like film and video, I could filter it the other way around and see, unfortunately, those that have not had any pledges in there at all as well. Now, with the time series functionality that we had a look at before, there are extra features that are hidden to the user. So this is the kind of access that you get hold of, which is all through the UI. However, there are extra features, parameters that can be entered through SACL, through code. So the first one is we've got length, which is telling us how many points we want to predict, and we said 12. We've also specified the dates that we're going to use, and we chose month when we were setting it up. You can ignore the last time period if you want to as well. You can also, and this is the cool one, specify a prediction interval. So this allows you to set a confidence interval in the data. And when it does this, it will generate a range. So instead of just giving us a prediction value, it'll say this prediction, and we're going to guess it's within this range with an 80% confidence interval as well, or a 95%. This is only accessed via SACL. Now, in addition to that, we can also specify the different models, which is no model. It's going to choose the best one for you, which is what I would suggest. We also have additive and multiplicative. Now, this is the method that's used is a Holtz linear trend or a Holtz Winters method with additive components. That's all I can tell you about the names of those. Okay. These are a form of trend smoothing. That's how it does it. It takes different levels of analysis to generate the model, do it in a smoothing where it can as well, which is why in some places it took the spikes out of it as well. Seasonality we saw as well. So with the prediction interval, what we can do, so if we go back, how SACL works is any dashboard, any lens that we create using the UI has a form which can be accessed through code, okay? And that does look ugly, does look a bit scary, but if I just change a value so that you can read it a bit better, we can see things like the seasonality is 12 and the length is 12 as well. Now, dashboards don't need to be formed just by dragging and dropping different items on there. You can also go ahead and make elements that interact with them like I have done here. Now, what I could do is I can go ahead and build a time series which generates a range. Now, this range is done via SACL. I will ask before I show, but is anyone interested in seeing how the SACL is done? Oh, you do want to see the SACL. Fantastic. We've got the SACL that's been generated here for the time series function. We've got these same values being generated. When you go over to SACL, it renames things. So we've got A, which is our original pledged amount, and B, which is our prediction column as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rename B as prediction. Okay, so anywhere we've got B in there, I'm going to rename it as prediction. Okay, and all I'm doing is changing B to prediction, and it should go away and rename the column header. There we go, it's called prediction. You can also see it's added a bunch of decimal places. So this can use standard mathematical functions like rounding, or if you're familiar with Excel, you can use a floor function, which is going to take it to the round it down. Okay, so it's a bit easier for us to read. Okay, so that's what we've done so far. We've just renamed the column. Now, where I mentioned over here, there's a function called prediction interval. You can see these functions listed in here. I could add in an extra one after seasonality, prediction interval equals, and you can only choose between 80 and 95. You can't choose any other options. If I choose 80, it's going to generate some extra columns, but it's not going to do it automatically for us. I'm going to keep pressing run. I put interval. There we go. Cool. So it's generated it in the data, but I haven't told it to display it. When it comes to displaying the results, it's displaying the date, it's displaying A, and it's displaying the prediction. When you use this function, you get some extra functions in there. So I could go ahead and take the same name, prediction, but now, and this is kind of a learned thing, we can do the high and the low. So we've got the range, we've got the low range and the high range between the prediction interval. So I can choose the low range. Let's do that. Low range and the low 80. Okay. And I'm going to say that I want to display that as the low, the value. Okay. Now I can do the exact same for the high value as well. I'm going to take just the name of my column, prediction, show me the high range, and generate that as the high value in there as well. Okay. I've just added in these extra ones there. And now I'm going to have 2 extra columns. Now, why is there no low and high value displayed map? And hopefully no one's there going, you did it wrong. What a loser. The prediction, this is all about proving and giving validity that the model that's generated is lining up well with the data. Okay, we don't need to give a range of where it's going to fall because we know where it fell. The high and low values are all generated further down. Okay, and let's make the column a bit longer so that we can see it a bit better. Okay, we're just renaming the columns. There we go. So we can see that the prediction was, there's lots of numbers there, 21 million. And the low prediction was 7.5 million. And the high prediction was 30.8 million in there as well. Now, what I might want to do is just floor that as well, so that I can see it without the decimal places. There we go. And we can also floor the low so that we can see it a little bit better as well. Okay, we can see the high and low. It's quite hard to see on tables though. Yeah, so if we go over to our chart mode, we can see the prediction, and we can see the high, and we can see the low. Okay, hopefully that didn't look too overwhelming in terms of adding in the SACL. But the next thing is about making this a bit more visible, a bit more easy to read. So on the formatting options, we have a bunch of different things. On the timeline chart, we can have a fill area, and we can have a shaded area, sorry, and we can shade between the different values. Okay, so we can shade between the low prediction and the high prediction, and we can shade the prediction. So it's shading that area for the prediction for us. Okay, so I don't have to see it as badly. We can also go ahead and use dashed lines maybe for the prediction. Okay, but we could leave the A column in a solid blue line as well. Plus, if we go to some of these more formatting options, we can add in a predictive line where it's going to be enter the date, and it'll allow me to see today's value in there as well. So that's how that kind of information can be formatted. All of those functions can be applied. It doesn't have to be complicated when you're doing it, but hopefully that kind of SACL made sense to those that have played around with SACL. I took this approach and I took it to my data. Where's my dashboard gone? And I've applied it out. Now, why is it dropping? For some reason, the amount of pledge has just dropped right off. Maybe some of these weren't quite finished and the campaign launched but wasn't fully completed in the time. So if we go to something instead like campaigns, and we have a look at the campaigns, we can see this is how many campaigns have been launched, and we can see it's following that same pattern because we're applying the seasonality. If we did not apply the seasonality, it's going to just produce a straight line for us. Okay, I can choose the number of prediction points. If instead of 12 I wanted 6, but the part that we've just done with the confidence interval, and I've linked all this up so that when I make a change here, it updates the code. Instead of an 80%, if I want a 95% confidence interval, if you're going to say that it's going to fall within this range with an 80% confidence, or going to fall within this range with a 95% confidence, then it's going to be a larger range when you change it to 95. So it's going to fill it a bit bigger in there as well. This is the basics. Well, sorry. This is how the time series functionality works within Einstein. Before I show you how we've used it at FinancialForce, and we've used it in a couple of our dashboards, is there any questions on that time series functionality, or is there any questions about Kickstarter that people want to know the answer to? Map visuals. You want to see where the most money has been invested. If we go over and we build a Kickstarter project, data set, there is, in the list of charts, there is a map. Okay. Now, this map requires you to have things listed in a certain way. Have I got longitude and latitude in there? No, I don't. But I do have location, but I don't think the country lines up with the name of the that we've got in there. What I mean is, if I went to country, there we go. These are all listed like this. Einstein expects 3 digits. For instance, USA. Have we got a state in there? Did we have a state in there? These are the, these state. Oh, state. State is the state of the campaign. Okay, so that we have status, if you like. If there was extra data, it would be nice to have the state. If you've not seen it, I go to these settings here, and you go to the map settings, you can see worlds, you can see North America, so it can do the states as well. I think if I scroll down to the bottom, there's a bunch of different maps that you can use in there. It's also possible, there we go, US states. It's also possible to include custom maps as well. You can upload custom maps. There's some stuff on Trailhead on building a custom map. So it's one of my things that I would eventually like to create a custom map showing made up numbers, of course, the utilization of people around the office, so that it would highlight different people in their chairs. I think that would be a little bit of fun. Any other questions about Einstein Analytics? So how are the settings set? How are the defaults set? So if I go in here into this dashboard and I went ahead and changed the state, it's currently set as successful. If I close this dashboard, it is not going to remember that I set it as successful. You can go in and you can set the initial properties for it. So I could say, right, actually only show me the successful ones, and maybe filter some other items as well. Press done. Oh, it seems to have forgotten. There we go. Successful, done. If I save now, it's going to remember it for the entire org. Okay, so next time I open it, here we go. Next time I open it, it's going to remember that I chose successful. Now there are other options as well. If I filtered to only show me the UK, okay, I can go ahead and set my own personal preferences as well. Up in the top left, I've got modified. I can save this view, so I can call this my GB view. Okay, I could also then go ahead and have another one, which is going to be US. That's now filtered for US. I could save another view for US, and these are my personal views, but now I can quickly switch between my filter settings of a particular dashboard as well, which is quite cool. Hopefully that answered your question. Does it need to be natively Einstein as a way to connect a legacy data source for reporting? Yes, you can. So when it comes to getting data into Einstein, you go ahead and you create a data set, which is where we were creating our reports. Data sets are like super report types. We have one at FinancialForce that takes 14 objects and combines them into a single data set, a single report type for 14 objects. Yeah, imagine going to Salesforce reports and trying to find all the combinations of that. I've uploaded CSV files in today's example. We can do the Salesforce data, okay? You can also do external data, and you can combine them together as well. If, for instance, you had your legacy data, you could upload it as a CSV file. You could then do your Salesforce data, and when the data's in Einstein, you could combine them together so that you're reporting on legacy and your actual data at the same time. I actually quite enjoy playing around with the data sets that you can bring in. I would encourage you to go to Kaggle, to spin up a Trailhead environment with Einstein, find a data set that interests you. So I've done some stuff around movies and IMDb scores. There's also one in here which is around UFO sightings. I was toying between Kickstarter and UFO sightings today on which I was going to cover, but I would encourage you to go and do that stuff and just upload it. Right, we want to know some stuff about FF reporting. Okay, so I was going to show you how we use time series at FinancialForce. I'm going to go to some of my favorites. One of the things we've got is a CFO dashboard, which shows you, and I won't spend too long on this because I don't want it to be a sales pitch, revenue, gross profit, operating expenses, and EBITDA. And you can go ahead and run this for different companies within your accounting. If they're all in there, change the frequency of the data that you're viewing as well. And we've made it so you can drill into the data to analyze it in different ways in those same kind of interactive dashboards that we've got. For instance, and here's a good example of the map that the data wasn't good for. I've got my revenue broken down by location. If I click on Sydney, it's going to filter to show me Sydney. Okay, I love that kind of stuff because that's just native Einstein Analytics. Oh, there we go, bit of lag. If I go back to the overview, you'll also notice we have trend prediction. When we were building these, we decided time series as a word might not mean anything to people. And so we wanted to just say that this is going to be a prediction based on trend. Yes, this is, what's the most successful FinancialForce product? We're an ERP, so we're all the products together. So they all work together. It depends how you define success, really. But what we've got here is it's looking at revenue. It's looking at it over time. What we did, we found that during research, people did not trust a prediction on its own. So we took the value and we displayed it backwards, just in a similar way as I did. So you can see, right, the model is in orange. The model is lining up pretty well with the actual transactions. So do you know what? I think that model is quite good. I'm going to trust it to give a little bit of validity to my forecasting that I'm doing in here. You can see we also provided the confidence interval pickers that we've got, the seasonality, which again, if you don't have seasonality, it's just going to be a straight line. How far forward, but also we put date range pickers on there as well, because sometimes your business 11 years ago when FinancialForce started, your business back then is different to it is now. So maybe you only want to take the last couple of years into account when you're generating predictions based on that kind of stuff. One thing people ask me about is, can I, for instance, do some stuff on opportunities? Well, yes, you can do stuff on opportunities. Can I go ahead and have it take into account things that haven't happened yet? You know, I know there's going to be a massive opportunity a couple months from now. Can I put that into this? Unfortunately not. It's only based on the data that it can see. Okay. Now, this is one area that we do it, and we do it on other things like cash flow forecasting as well, which is cool. But we also, on the professional services side, have a cool dashboard, which is our project burn up. So what this allows you to do is choose a project and have a look in the blue line here at how much has been billed for that project. Okay, so things that have been logged. People log in their time. It then lets you look at what's scheduled to be worked on. You know, you've got an assignment you've done. Maybe it's from October to the end of the year. So you've logged a week's worth of work, but you've still got loads of other work that's still in the system that you're going to work on. So it's got that in there. We then use that time series functionality to generate a prediction. Okay, it generates a prediction line. Because I've not got much data, the prediction's just a straight line. You need roughly 2 years worth of data to have a good seasonality prediction, because it needs 2 seasons. We then took the budget information separately and logged the budget information. And then we did some cool stuff to go, right, at what point does this time series prediction line intersect the budget? Now, it's intersecting, in this case, around about the end of the project. Okay, so there's a little bit of an amber warning there to say, right, there's a possibility of you running out of budget before the end of the project. If it was much later, I think if I change to view hours instead of billings, it's going to exceed you're going to exceed your budget much further after the project has ended, in which case you don't have to worry too much. You'll still have some budget left once the project has ended. So we can see the intersect and work that stuff out. This is kind of advanced stuff we've done in our product. All the predictions, everything I've shown so far, the stuff I showed before with the time series is out of box with Einstein Analytics growth licenses. Can we show the dashboard built into a partner community? You can get community license. You can get analytics community licenses. Yes, that is possible. We've not done that yet, but that is possible. The other thing I want to finish on about the some of these dashboards as well is that these kind of predictions are really cool. I think they're cool, and it's filtered by an individual project. You should really, when you're building dashboards, try to embed them wherever you can. So if I open up this project, we've got another version of this dashboard, which has been designed to be embedded. There we go. And I've embedded the Einstein dashboard within the project record. Done a little bit of different styling there, but I think stuff like that, if you want people to adopt analytics, embed it. And that there, well, I think it looks pretty beautiful for an embedded dashboard, which looks like it's part of the rest of the system. That was all I had to show on the FinancialForce stuff. I hope that was interesting. If you are using Einstein, or at least knowing that there's some of the predictive capabilities in there without having to get the full AI stuff. Can we control the visibility of fields based on the user? You can have row-based security. Yeah, row-based security. So if I can't see a project, I can't see the project. Okay, I can't see a company, I won't see the company, all those lines related to that company or project as well. It doesn't handle field level security. Yeah, I think for a lot of this stuff, different additions, check out the Salesforce website. Some of the stuff includes AI. What I've shown you is part of the growth license, if you have a look at that one. Can you get a development account? Yes, you can. Same way as the Salesforce one. Most of them have analytics enabled in them by default as well now. Analytics is mandatory or optional to run financials. It is optional, but encouraged. Depends on the size of the business. If it's an enterprise business, we would highly encourage getting the analytics for the volumes alone.
So today we're going to talk about winning the war against bad CRM data. Anyone who's been using CRM for a long time knows that the challenge. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This will not be nearly as technical as at the Masri presentation, but I do think you'll come away some solid, actionable things. A bit about me. My name is David Masri. This year I founded Gluon Digital. We're a boutique consultancy that specializes in partnering with Salesforce SIs to help them with really complex data projects that they may be included as part of their Salesforce implementations, but they don't necessarily have the in-house expertise. So often this revolves around really complex data migrations or really complex integrations that may be involving other clouds like Azure or AWS. And sometimes we'll help them build a team. The variety of data services, but it's again heavily targeted towards working with Salesforce SIs and partnering with them. Before I founded Gluon, I was director of professional services at Plative. I worked a little bit at Silverline, so you guys have heard them. And I ran the data team within Capgemini Invent Salesforce practice. So I ran the data strategy and architecture team there. My team headed up all of our data migrations and integrations for Capgemini Invent within the Salesforce practice. about 2 years ago. I published a book, Developing Data Migrations and Integrations. It's available everywhere. I know I'm the author, so I'm a bit biased, but I would definitely recommend this book if you're struggling with design of a complex integration, or you're struggling with your data migrations. They're getting maybe a little bit too big or difficult to wield. Yep. So that's about me. So I've been doing this for about 20 years and came up through the enterprise system space before moving into CRM. Worked with a ton of different CRM systems, BI systems, e-commerce. Most of my career has been in professional services. Today, we're basically gonna answer 2 questions. The first one is, why are CRM systems so susceptible to bad data, or at least why I believe they're so susceptible to bad data? No, not necessarily talking about Salesforce. Generally, most CRM systems face the same kind of data issues. And then we'll do some comparing, like why other systems don't suffer those same problems, why this more of a CRM system issue. And then once we kind of know the core reasons behind why CRM systems are so susceptible to bad data, we'll talk about some strategies to deal with those issues, right? And so essentially, what can we do about it? So I wanted to thank you guys again for inviting me to speak here, both Chris and Dylan, and Third Republic, and of course FinancialForce for sponsoring, and Matthew also for speaking. For those of you who don't know, I actually work with the Third Republic group here in New York. We've been running meetings monthly. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys again before I forget. Okay, so again, what are we talking about today? First, why are CRM systems susceptible to bad data? And then what can we do about it? Okay, so we will go through 6 reasons why. And this is what I believe are, there's a method called, like, you ask 5 whys to get to the root cause. So that's essentially what I want to do with these 6 reasons. So we're talking root causes or root reasons. So reason number 1, CRM systems data goes stale at an incredibly fast rate, much faster than other systems. And by going stale, what I mean is the data gets outdated. So Informatica, which is a leading ETL tool, middleware, or service bus, whichever you want to call them, they predicted that in CRM system, 30% decay every year. That means every year, 30% of the data in your CRM system becomes outdated for no other reason than the world moved and your CRM system wasn't updated. And in some high churn industries like technology, that can be as high as 70% a year, right? So CRM data goes stale incredibly fast. Reasons for that: people move, right? They change their phone number, they change jobs, they might update their email address, and that's just at the personal level. Again, companies also change, right? They might rebrand, they might rename, they might restructure. Local governments pass laws. They can even redistrict things, move postal codes around. All of that kind of stuff makes previous CRM data that was correct now be wrong, essentially, right? And if you compare this to ERP, and of course Matthew can tell you, he's in that space, is ERP systems generally are looking at, and most systems, not just ERP, are generally looking at historicals, right? What did we invoice? What did we bill? Where did we ship something, right? What was the tracking code when we shipped it? And with CRM systems, we're often, because it's a sales, you often current, I need to know the current state of my customer, not necessarily what they did in the past. It's more important to know what they're doing now, and then what they're doing in the future. So that's reason number 1. Bad reason number 2, lots of manual data entry by non-data entry people, right? So essentially you have salespeople who are not data entry clerks doing data entry. So they'll get on the phone with a prospect, they'll ask them a bunch of questions. The prospect may not feel like giving them the answer. The prospect might lie to them, right? How many employees do they have? They want to sound bigger. So because if you have bigger, then, might be like the potential for a larger sale in the future, and then they can get a discount. There's often a bias on the client's part or an incentive to not necessarily be wholly truthful, right? They're required or reliant on a customer voluntarily giving information. It's not like it's the stuff that they know. They're asking people what their opinions on. The customer themselves might not know, that they make something up. Often the salespeople don't care about this data. They think it's only for like management reporting. So they don't even bother asking it because the salespeople don't know, the admins can't enforce them to enter this data because they don't know what that data is. And then when they do enter it, and then again, the companies change and time moves on, nobody ever goes back and updates this, what they will classify as useless data, right? So they don't go back and maintain it. That's reason number 2. All right. Reason number 3 is an absolute large volume of free text fields. When you look at CRM systems, they're, enter notes on the activity, enter notes on the contact, enter notes on the account, enter notes on the opportunity. So there's a tremendous amount of free text data. And if you're a data person or somebody who likes to build a lot of reports, what happens is this free text data is the most frustrating thing in the world because it's almost useless in terms of reporting. It's great for, I want to look at a particular record and see what the previous person or what I thought about something at the time, or, a quick summary of what's going on, but you can't really report on it. And if you do want to report it, you have to essentially deploy some kind of AI that will take the large text data and kind of classify it one way or another. So if you look at Einstein language, it's somewhat limited where it does things like sentiment analysis or classification. So I can have it read my notes data and say this customer is angry or this customer is happy. But again, that's not the same thing as having, right, like say a series of pick lists where you classify it. And a lot of that stuff, it's just lost, right? And it's definitely not easy to report across companies or across contacts. And of course, there's no consistency. Anybody can type anything in a notes field. On a side note, it's also a compliance issue because I'm not allowed to capture social security numbers or some form of ID numbers. I don't know what the UK equivalent to social security number is. And then how do I stop them from typing that into a free text field? It becomes another big security headache. So reason number 4. So you have a UI focused data model. Believe it or not, this is actually a breakaway from traditional data thinking. So traditional data thinking, if I was a DBA, if I was designing a system, essentially you'd have 2 people. You have one person who's designing the data model, and you'd have someone else who's building the UI. And if the person who was building the UI would, go to the DBA, database administrator, and say, hey, can you change your data model so that it makes it easier for me to build my UI? The DBA would basically kick them out of the room, right? And they would tell you something along the lines of, I don't care about your UI. This data is going to live here for the next 50 years, maybe longer. It'll probably be there for the life of the company. Your UI is going to go away in 5 years max, right? And then the data will either be migrated to another system, but your data is going to outlive the system that owns it. That's historically been true. It will outlive the system that owns it for decades. And even if not, let's say you plan on having Salesforce now because it's a cloud system for decades. The Salesforce data model will potentially change. So again, the traditional thinking was I model my data to truth and I don't care about the UI, that's the developer's problem. And then when you get to CRMs, particularly cloud CRMs, they mash the two of these things together. They even name the data fields, or the data types are actually even named after UI components, right? The name of the data field is checkbox. It's not Boolean. It's a text box. It's not string. Phone number is a data type, right? Email address, right? They're based on the UI needs, not based on the data needs. And then the traditional theorem thinking is like, I don't care. I just want to be able to build the UI fast. I mean, I want my code to run fast, and I'm going to worry about the data model when I need to either integrate with something or move away from it. It's not my problem today. It's my problem tomorrow. But it causes a lot of issues. This is not to say that the CRM systems are doing something that's bad or wrong. What happens is they're essentially deploying big data techniques for performance, right? They're the trade-off between how I do my data model and the speed that I can either read or write data. And essentially what they're doing is they're doing these trade-offs, often trading, I need super fast read speed for a much smaller or a slower write speed, meaning it takes long to write to the database, but I can read my data really, really fast, right? And these are big data design patterns, essentially. Now, what happens is like, yeah, but my CRM data is not that big. But when you get it to a multi-tenant system, all that data is in the same place, and then it is big. It's actually gigantic. And that's why they're kind of forced into these big data patterns. This is why they put governor limits. This is why you have to write triggers to replicate data all over the place. Reason number 5, circular reference in data models. So if you take a look at this picture, this is the Sales Cloud ERD. ERD stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. It's absolutely nuts. And if you were to look at a more traditional diagram, you don't have these kind of circular references. So to explain what I'm talking about is if I have an opportunity, I should have one account ID, and I should only have one way. And by should, I mean, again, in terms of traditional thinking, right? I should only have one way of knowing what the account is. But if I start from an opportunity in Salesforce, the opportunity is related to the account. The opportunity could also be related to an order, which is then related to an account. The opportunity can be related to a quote, which is related to a contact, which is related to an account. The opportunity can be related to a quote, that's related to an order, that's related to a contact, that's related to an account. The quote's also directly related to the contact, so you don't have to do that additional hop. You can, in theory, go opportunity to another opportunity, a parent opportunity to a contact role, to the contact, to the account contact role, and then back up to the account, right? And if you look at the ERD, all of those are valid. Now, and these are just, again, we're just talking Salesforce here. This is not even custom objects. And then when you look on designing your systems, Salesforce and most CRM systems are going to encourage you to do this kind of things. Now, unless you're coding very careful, you'll often end up with the things giving you different results depending on the route that you go. Now, you could obviously make the argument, and it's a very good argument, that, right, the account contact role maybe is allowed to be associated to a different account than the opportunity is related to. So the opportunity is related to account A. There's a contact on it that's related to account B. Maybe those companies are partner companies. There's a million and one reasons why that might happen. But it doesn't change the fact that you have a lot of these circular references. You don't necessarily know or easily know which is the right way to triangulate to get to the proper data. And then you add in things like record types, and this gets incredibly more complex and often causes a lot of other issues. Then again, this is why we're always writing workflows and process builders to keep data in sync across various different objects. where in a more traditional data model, the data model itself enforces the integrity of the data. And the last reason, and this is my absolute personal favorite of all of these, is the relative lack of importance of CRM data to an organization. Now, I know where most people in this room are probably working within the Salesforce space, which is obviously CRM, or within the Salesforce or within the CRM space. So you probably, it's close to you, and you might not feel that this is true, but it absolutely is. It's actually one of the reasons I like working in CRM, because they're the high tolerance for downtime, and that means I don't have to work weekends as much. When something goes wrong, you can often wait till Monday morning. So just to give you a couple of examples of how true this is, just absolutely how true this is, right? So if you work at Citibank, which is a major bank throughout the world, right, and their core banking system goes down, right, people lose access money to the for 2 days. How serious of an issue is that, right? It's a whole lot worse if their CRM system goes down and they can't send out email alerts of deposits, let's say, even though that's incredibly important too, right? What would happen if Amazon can't process credit card payments for a single hour, right? That's a whole lot worse than if they can't send out packet tracking information for 2 days even. What would happen if Google can't serve AdWords for even 20 minutes, right? That's a lot worse than if their call center went down. Now, in fact, Google doesn't even have a call center because they don't care. So, right, they're not even tracking phone calls to customers at all because it just simply won't take them. So if I have an ERP system, right, what happens if a user decides, I'm not going to enter this order into the ERP system? That person will probably get fired, right? What happens if you go to your jewelry company and you go to ship a piece of jewelry, maybe a diamond ring, and the ring isn't where the inventory system tells you it should be? So the inventory system data is inaccurate because the ring is not there. Everyone in that warehouse will be working overtime and take a full audit of inventory until everything is 100% accurate, right? And potentially they might call the authorities to look into what's going on, right? Again, for either of those, if something like that happened in a CRM system, they'd basically shrug their shoulders. Heck, even if the inventory was wrong in the CRM system, people would just shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I'll look into it tomorrow. If your gaming system can't track gems or coins or points or whatever you're doing on Candy Crush, right? They're gonna stop, right? They'll stop playing the game, and then your ad revenue will essentially dry up. You'll stop making money. What happens if your e-commerce platform can't validate credit cards for whatever reason? Essentially, that will just never happen. It just doesn't happen because it will never allow that to happen. And just again, for another good CRM example, what would happen if your top salesperson refuses to enter his opportunity data into the CRM system, right? He's basically going to get a thank you for being a top performer. And then maybe he'll get, a side of, can you please try to enter your opportunities into the CRM system for the 40th time. You'll ask him, and then he'll sure, he'll scoff off at that request. So before we jump into exactly what can we do about this and all of these 6 core problems that are at the root of bad CRM data, anybody have any questions or comments? Whose responsibility is it for bad data to fix? So that's a great question. We'll address that kind of in a minute. When I put this presentation together, it's sort of who owns the CRM system and who's ultimately responsible for the data. That probably should be the Salesforce admin or the consultant. That's what I would say heading up the initiative. But ultimately, it's going to be the data owner, right? And we'll talk through that a bit in a minute. So how do we prevent this? All right, so we went through 6 problems. Propensity for data to go stale, lots of manual data entry by people who don't know how to do data entry and don't necessarily want to be doing data entry. Heavy use of free text fields, UI-focused data model. Good luck changing Salesforce's logic or thinking. Circular references in the data model, relatively lack of importance to an organization. And essentially, there's literally nothing you can do about these things. These things are going to remain true for the foreseeable future, potentially forever. So what that means is that we have to take a very reactive approach as opposed to a proactive one. So we can't put in a process that's going to stop this from happening, because we can't stop it from happening. So we want to put in a reactive approach that catches it and deals with it immediately or close to that. And I'm going to walk you through a 5-step battle plan for this. Okay, so how do we win this war with a not so simple 5-step reactive battle plan? So step number 1 is, when you're building your CRM system, when you're planning your CRM system, or even planning the next phase of the CRM system, right? There comes a point, maybe it's sprint planning, maybe it's backlog planning, where we're planning what features we're going to implement. And I kind of categorize either 2 types. One is user features that users need, and then there's features for managerial. And often the managerial ones, they want a lot of extra data points because it helps them with their reporting. And what I'm recommending is you choose features. When choosing new features to implement, you heavily have a bias towards and prioritize user features. So these are features that are going to make it easier for the user to do their job, and not necessarily things that the manager would need, or even the executive. And what it does is it promotes user adoption, because now they have a system that's designed for them and works for them, and it gives them an incentive to take ownership of their own data and to maintain it, because they're getting a good return on that data. Like, it's a good ROI for them, right? Now, this is often a difficult thing to write. Is like, you're trying to close a deal, you are working with with a client potentially, or the department sponsoring the project is often the ones with the checkbook. They're often the ones that are funding this project. So as good consultants or good advisors, it's our job to inform them that if you want to have good user adoption, you have to build a system towards the users. Once we get good user adoption, they're maintaining the system in a good way, then we can kind of go back and layer in good managerial features and reporting. Step 2. So step 2 is, we're going to put in processes that automatically identify bad or stale data, and then classify them appropriately, and then have our users essentially audit those records and update them, right? So we should always know the state of our data. We should know which records are quote unquote good, which ones are bad, what is stale, what is incomplete, right? And to do this really is really not that difficult, right? To identify a stale record, it can almost be as long as I have a definition for stale, or as for good, or as what bad is, I can quickly build a formula field even, and then generate reports on that. So I can say any record that hasn't been updated in 2 years, I'm going to classify it as stale, and I want my user to review it and confirm the data, or maybe reach out to that contact, right? I can easily have definitions of what's a complete record, what's an incomplete record, right? Based on what fields are populated, right? Now, these rules need to be varied based on the record type. So the definition of a good record for a customer is very different than a good record for a prospect, because I expect a customer record to have a lot more data. It's, for example, it might be perfectly acceptable to not have a mailing address for a prospect. They just have a phone number, while for a customer, I absolutely need a mailing address, especially if I'm shipping them goods. right? And that's different for a lead. So you want to work to classify your records, at least in this state, right? Good, bad, stale, or incomplete. And then if you don't, right, it's essentially very, very fundamental. If you don't know the state of your data, you can't fix what you don't know is broke. Okay, step 3. It's now your user's job, the record owner's or the relationship owner's job to, keep the data maintained. And if the data is not being maintained, you want to not only update that formula field that's telling you how the data is classified as stale or bad, but you also want to potentially demote the actual record type. So, for example, if I have a contact record and the record type is client, but they haven't made a purchase in 2 years, maybe I should have a process that's going to automatically downgrade them to a prospect, and then perhaps they should go through the qualification process again, right? So you want to potentially downgrade the records, right? So it's okay. Client hasn't made a purchase in a while. Downgrade them back to a prospect, maybe even back to a lead, and then put them back through the cycle. Sales executives that are not maintaining regular contact with the client. So one of the great things to know if a record is current or in a good state is if activities are being logged against that record. So if activities are being logged against the record, you could assume that the salespeople know that there's the relationship going on there, and in theory they should be updating it. So if you see that 15 calls over 2 years, but they never updated the contact record, okay, that raises a red flag. If you're having salespeople who are not contacting with a client, they should probably be taken away. So you should take that former client, demote it to a prospect, and assign it to a new account executive who's going to properly manage that account. And that's great for data cleanliness, but it's also good business, right? Give accounts to people who are going to manage them properly and keep the data up to date. Step 4 is, if possible, it's not always necessarily the case, is you want to use self-procuring data. And self-procuring is essentially just a fancy way of saying self-maintaining data wherever possible. And this often means that you got to bring in integrations. So, for example, if I'm sending out marketing blasts and email bounces, right, that should go back into the CRM system, marking that email as this new email address is potentially invalid, and it needs to be validated. The contact record should be updated or demoted to something else potentially. So if I have client data in an ERP system, again, ERP systems are generally very well maintained. Right, if they're going to change their address, they're going to call the audit department and say, hey, I got a new shipping address, send my packages here, or a new billing address, right? So that data tends to be very good. So if you can feed that data into the ERP system, again, that becomes self-maintaining. If you're doing things like buying lead lists, what you want to do is you load that into the CRM system, great. Make sure you store the lead source and the lead ID, the source ID into the CRM system so that the next time you buy that list, you can update the same records potentially if they haven't been worked, or have some rules and maybe some other talk. I'll explain to exactly how to do this. Only update the records that haven't been, modified by a user. So if the user is now being user maintained, don't reload the lists, those leads in. We loaded 500,000 leads last time. We're gonna reload the same lead source with updated values, but we only want to update, the 300,000 that we didn't touch or didn't work. Again, if it's cost effective, use public data sets, things from professional organizations, things like FINRA, which is over here in the US at the National Association for Brokers. the American Bar Association that has all the lawyer informations. There are plenty of professional healthcare databases that list out all the doctors and lawyers. There are address normalization and verification services out there that, again, can really, really help keep your data in good form. Step 5 is always use dupe detection and be very strategic in your use of validating data. And I'm very cautious to say strategically and not heavily, because overzealous validation rules cause problems. And what happens is you want to use validation rules to prevent errors, not to force you to do anything. And it's important to note that your validation rules are not smarter. They should say smarter, not smarted. Smarter than your users, right? Computers are not smarter than people. Computers are not taskmasters that can force a person to do anything. And if you try to force them, they can get incredibly smart or incredibly crafty in the way they bypass your validation rules. So if I'm going to demand an email address and a salesperson had a prospect on the line, and the prospect's like, I don't want your spam, I'm not giving you my email address, and it becomes a required field, what's a salesperson going to do? They're going to enter, no email at gmail.com just to get past your validation rule. So you're almost encouraging the creation of bad data because you're forcing the user to do something that they can't do. And again, you're not going to force them to do it. He's not going to lose his sale. He's just going to enter in bad data. I have a screenshot here from a restaurant's reservation systems that essentially the system was too difficult to use, and the users found a brilliant way to get around it. All they got to do was take a Sharpie and they mark off on the screen when a reservation has been used, and they'd write the name in a book, and then at the end of the day, they would just take a washcloth and wipe the screen clean, and then they would do this the next day. So all they used the reservation system for was to list out the tables and their availability, and then actually mark it on the screen, with a marker, right? That's how crafty users can get to bypass your validation rules. So validation rules should be there to prevent error, not to force a user to do something, right? Because they cannot and will not be controlled by a computer. So essentially, the science fiction world has been lying to you this whole time. Okay, so that essentially concludes my talk. Hopefully you've gotten some things out of this that you can put into action. Check out my blog, Salesforce Data Blog. I tend to publish an article about once a month. Talks about all sorts of data issues, data related topics with Salesforce, often data migration best practices, integration best practices. You can check out my corporate website if you like. I'm on LinkedIn, post regularly. You can search me by name, and my book is available everywhere, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. You can search either by my name, David Masri, or Salesforce Data Migrations and Integrations, and it'll come up.
What is the best way to get the customer's data? For example, in our company sometimes changing the address and may not letting us know, and after that coming to us and saying, oh, our invoices was posted to the wrong address, but they never let us know. So what is the best way to figure out this? Is there is any systems like automatically do that, or what is the best approach?
I don't know your industry, so this is going to vary by industry. So if you're in a high touch industry, meaning I have a service level, and it's the account executive's job to talk to the client regularly, to maintain a good relationship, potentially to get upsells, make sure that they're have feedback on the products that you're selling, right? That kind of stuff. So it should be that person's job to update it if you have such a person, right? And they should know in advance. I mean, it could happen a month, but in a way, it's almost good that they tell you, because now you can update your system. The second thing you can do is potentially integrate with like the Yellow Pages or the National Directory for businesses, right? Which I guess would be updated, but potentially late. And
But
then there are other things you can do, like website forms. Or,
that can be not a solution, because HQ can be completely different address, and usually in UK it's going as a main HQ address, and after that venues or whatever you have.
Mm-hmm. But you would know if it changed, right? So let's say it previously matched and now it no longer matches. That's a flag. I'm not necessarily saying you should update your system based on that, but you'd know to check. Hey, it looks like you moved.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, if you get very sophisticated, you can monitor websites, their client website, and scrape it from there.
Yeah, what is the best, like, the duplication tool? I'm not really a fan of the Salesforce native one. Is there any good, like, real external one, like even the paid one, but decent one? Because as I said, I'm not a fan of the native.
Yeah, people like Demand Tools. I think they're the market leader. It's not really reactive because it kind of sits outside the system. I tend to write my own. Okay. Honestly, I tend to build it in house, but it's normally because I'm doing as part of a migration or data cleanup project, which is different than you want something that prevents it.
Is there any way we can identify, like for different industries, what type of minimum data we can migrate, if it is a kind of migration project or something? Like, for example, like for servicing industry, you must need to have your customer data in system. But for other things, like if they have something else, you can integrate, right? Similar to like sales industry or some financial industry, is there any metric or anything do you have, or you can suggest?
Yeah, I mean, talk to your system users. You don't want to give them, and don't bother getting data that your users don't need. Right? Again, you want to focus on usability and what your users need. So, just because the industry as a whole is doing it one way doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow it. If you find it's important for the sale or for servicing the client, then you want to bring that data in. Every industry is so niche, and I don't think there's a central place that you can go to, like, look up, say, these industries tend to track these data points.
Yeah, okay. Lots of projects I have seen, like when people think about this migration, they just think about to dump everything in, let's say, in Salesforce. But I just wanted to know, so you're saying that we just need to engage business owner and just understand what they need actually, and then based on that, we can design our migration strategy. That's what you're trying to say?
Yes, and the data cleansing strategy, both at the same time. You don't want to start with bad data because you'll never get your user adoption up. It's actually one of the reasons why people lose data adoption. So what'll happen is you have the data in the legacy system, you don't have data quality processes in place, the data goes to the pot, let's say. Data gets bad. They call that a failed implementation. Now they want to migrate to Salesforce. What they might not be saying is, it's not necessarily that the previous system was so horrible. It just didn't have data processes in place. So now if I take all that bad data and move it into Salesforce, and now I start, like, you're going to infuriate your user base. Because, like, what are you doing there? I've seen this more times than I can count. Every time they buy a lead list, they load the whole lead list and then do an email blast. So if they're doing 10 email blasts a day, they buy the entire external thing, lit it in, and then they have the same contact in there 50 times. And then every time they log a call, they're picking a different contact. Like, the entire system is useless for historical data because of that, right? It's not only that you have duplicates in the system, you have the related data that's now not mastered to the correct contact. So I don't even know when I last called them. Then it impacts your marketing campaigns because you start targeting the same person 4 times in the same day with different email campaigns, and you can't control your outbound messaging, right? Or your phone messaging because you have no idea how often people are being contacted. Duplicate data is a big problem in CRM systems. And if you don't have a strategy to fix it, it can potentially kill the implementation. People blame the system, then say they're going to move to Salesforce, and then you're going to start with bad data. So if you're coming from a system where it's a big reason for them moving is data quality. You have to fix the data as part of the migration process. I tend to do it in the data migration code itself. So I have code there that fixes the data. As I'm doing the migration, I'm generating reports for stuff that I need the account executives to fix, have them fix data in the legacy system. And I can classify records that I'm not going to migrate. I'm going to migrate from the legacy system to only update the appropriate records. I merge all those children records from all those duplicate contacts as part of the migration. That's how I do it. Matma mentioned Cloud Ingo for dupe detection. That is a popular one too.
In a typical agile project means where we are not sure about the requirements, where we are sure about few of the requirements, at what point of time we need to start thinking about the migration?
Day one.
But it could be a possibility
and I'll tell you what,
that there are only few functionalities, like only key functionalities where you are start thinking about the migration, but there are a couple of things that actually might impact later on when you go into the detailed requirements and when you have more complex requirements later on.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm saying when you start day one. I'm not saying you start moving data day one. I'm saying you start the analysis day one. So the way we do data migrations properly, and all of this is in my book, the data quality stuff is not, but the data migration stuff is absolutely covered. Dupe detection, all this kind of stuff. So here's what happens. I know I need to migrate from Microsoft Dynamics to Salesforce. I can talk to my client for 4 days and ask them what they're doing. Then I look at the data and the data in Dynamics, and the data in Dynamics tells a different story, close story, but different enough than what the client told me. Then I have to ask about the edge cases. You said that you only ever have one appointment per month, let's say, or your sales cycle follows this, but I see these other records here in Dynamics that don't follow the same sales cycle, or don't fit the same classification, right? And then they're going to say, oh, that was from 2 years ago, but then we changed the process midway. Now you still have to know how to deal with that in the data migration. They might also say something like, when I told you that, I really meant 80% of the time, but there's 20% of the time that we didn't think was important to talk about. So you want to understand the legacy data from day one. You want to use your understanding of that data to help drive the business requirements and make sure that the story you're getting from analyzing the data, the existing data, matches the story you're getting from your requirement sessions. And you can then work out the edge cases. You can work out how much data do they want to actually migrate. You can work out how your data cleansing approach, because you can now do analysis to see how bad the legacy data was, right? And all of that stuff you want to know early on. You have those conversations early on. Then you build your migrations as the Salesforce team is building out the system. It's usually 1 or 2 sprints behind. So let's say you're starting your first sprint, accounts and contacts. So they do sprint 1, and then sprint 2, they're moving on to opportunities. The data team is loading accounts and contacts, right? Trailing. And then it's still fresh in their mind what they build. The data team can work with them in close. And then by the time you get to UAT, your client can test not only the code, but the data in the system with the quality rules that were put as part of the migration.
I was interested in how you spoke about the circular nature of objects, so accounts going on through to contacts and so on. Mm-hmm. Do you have any expert tips for setting up work processes to auto-update fields across objects?
In theory, it should be that when you select it, it should only display the right records to select. But again, they can change later. So it's not necessarily the right thing to do, particularly when you're talking about historical things like opportunities. So I have an opportunity contact, right? And then that contact 2 years later, after the opportunity was lost or won, moves companies. Like, what's supposed to happen there? There's supposed to be a discrepancy. in that case. So it's not necessarily that you want to enforce it, but you really need to understand what those relationships mean. It's not easy, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Yeah, it's not necessarily wrong. If they have to be in sync, then that's a good place to put in code in place, be it a workflow or process builder, to enforce that it's entered right to begin with, or that they can only select the proper records, and then use triggers, I guess, to keep the code in sync. It's a difficult challenge, unfortunately. Hopefully we don't have too many. Most people don't use all of those objects, so it makes it a little bit easier.
Obviously, thank everybody tremendously for being part of this. Once again, Matthew and David, thank you both for those wicked talks, and thanks again for coming to Salesforce Republic.